everyone, CWD Music Reviews here. I'm CWD and this is going to be a music review of the new Primal Scream album, Chaosmosis. Primal Scream is the long-running alternative dance, experimental rock, alternative rock project fronted by Mr. Robert Gillespie, and this is their 11th studio album. I'm not that huge of a Primal Scream guy. I listened to their album Exterminator, and I thought that was an interesting sonic experience. It was loud for what it was meant to be, but it was certainly an enjoyable experience for the most part. But I really gained an appreciation for what they did when I listened to their seminal album, Screamadelica. That was an interesting and really peculiar fusion of this experimental rock sound and acid house. They really futz with acid house a lot on that album. So yeah, I was certainly interested in what Primal Scream is going to do next. I mean, they put out good albums in the past, and I have no reason to think that an album is going to be horrible, so I thought I'd give this album a try. The good news is, this album's not horrible. The bad news is, it's not great either. In fact, I'm not even 100% sure how to feel about this album. Now, this is about 10 tracks and just under 40 minutes. It's like 36 minutes in length. Really short experience. I mean, they're known for these really particularly lengthy albums. Now they're giving this 36-minute album, and that's pretty much the big complaint for me. Well, one of the big complaints for me, that it's just brief. Like, by the time I get to track 8, I'm looking at the iPad or the iPod or whatever device I'm listening on and notice that the album is almost over. But what about the music? What about the compositions and production and all that shit? Not really anything new or even that boundary pushing whatsoever. They pretty much just try to make a alternative dance and dance pop record that just stays within the basic standard and not much beyond that. The opening track, Trippin' on Your Love, blatantly rips off themselves on Screamadelica. This track reminds me of the opening track off of Screamadelica, Moving On Up. Just way too much. It's bright, it's got the specific drum toms. There's like these really catchy vocals from Hi-Am that remind me too much of the female vocals on Screamadelica. They're not as like passionate, obviously. Then they get the track Feeling Like a Demon Again, which, like Screamadelica, like right after that goes into this sudden electronic direction, but not like in an acid house kind of way, more so in an alternative dance and dance pop direction. It's got these kinda mechanical dance beats and like synth usage that doesn't really keep the track engaging particularly, especially with Robert Gillespie's lethargic vocal delivery. And this vocal delivery is even at its worst with I Can Change, where he's not only sounding lethargic, but his falsetto is just so bad. It's just so off. I hate his vocal delivery. I can change. Between that, we get like another like subdued dance pop pattern that I do not like at all. 100% or nothing in particular. It's got maybe kind of a catchy synth, but it just feels way too long for its own good. And then we get Private Wars, which I don't see why we needed like an acoustic interlude on this track. The backup sing sounds like really somber and really adds character to Robert Gillespie's still lethargic voice, but they've yet to have given us like anything in terms of a hard-hitting dance beat or anything of that nature, and now we're just getting this acoustic interlude, and I don't see the point in it. It's not a bad track, it just has no place in the album. But then the album picks up with the second half, where the light gets in, features Skyfer. Robert and Sky are like really kinda trading lines with each other. I think the hook is pretty catchy and pretty upbeat. Now we're getting alternative dance that I could really get down to. Dance pop that I could really get down to. It does seem U2 influenced and maybe some modern day Reflector era Arcade Fire influence. Like, this track would have been on Reflector if James Murphy took complete control of the production, but still, it's an enjoyable track. But I think my favorite track on this album is When the Blackout Meets the Fallout. The instrumental gets really industrial and really hectic. I especially love the hook. When the blackout meets the fallout. It just sounds nuts. And then we get Carnival of Fools. It does go maybe a little long for its own good, but the same can be said for like a good chunk of these tracks, which is really unfortunate given that this album is already so short. I think my favorite track on the album, if not When the Blackout Meets the Fallout, is Golden Rope. It sounds really great. It's a really driving alternative rock and kind of a post-punk type song that justifies its length. I dig the middle, where just like the instrumental gets soft and then Gillespie singing about how he feels damaged or something like that, which kind of seems Screamadelica influenced once again, but here it sounds a bit more refreshing. And then eventually just builds and builds, and it really ends particularly well. And the closing track, Ottoman Paradise. It's a track I like, it's just not a track that I'm crazy for. It's certainly a solid closer, it's just that I don't particularly care much for the hook, but the instrumental works, certainly. It doesn't do much different from what Golden Rope just did, but you could end the album worse. So overall, there really wasn't much to say about this album. It's Primal Scream putting out a rudimentary Primal Scream album. If you like Primal Scream a lot, you'll probably like this album quite a bit. Although, me personally, I just don't get why this really ever-changing, ever-innovative and fresh band just decided to put out an album that is so out of touch with its own legacy and so out of touch with what is already established in the world of music. I just don't get why they looked at this album and thought, yeah, this is done. I don't think it's done. It feels undercooked. It feels like just a fan pleaser. But even this kind of fan pleaser is not really just like, there's qualities that even a non-fan could really appreciate and probably get turned on to. It's not like that at all. This isn't like a Kendrick Lamar's Untitled Unmastered type thing. This is like a band putting out stuff that were probably just outtakes from numerous albums before this one instead of just compositions they thoroughly worked on, and that's really disappointing. It's okay. It's just, by the standard Primal Scream have set for this particular genre, it doesn't really do it for me personally. Nor should it really do much for a lot of people that really admire what Primal Scream have done in the past. This album is a +0.4 out of +3. It's enjoyable for a moment. The second half itself could have been a decent EP, but the album as a whole, yeah, it's not really doing much for me. But if you're giving this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that? And what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? This is CWD Music Reviews here, signing off.